Hello and welcome to the book view of the New Indian Express, our monthly format where we interview authors on their new releases. Today we have with us Mr. Pramod Kapoor, publisher of Rolly Books and writer of several books on history. His latest release is 1946, The Last War of Independence, the Royal Indian Navy Mutiny. It talks about, it's a deeply insightful book about a period in our history which has long been forgotten. It is being spoken about now, and he spent several years doing research on this book. It's the Royal Indian Navy Mutiny. This is the book 1946, and anyone who's interested in history and not interested in history like me should pick this book up to know more about it. So I'll just go straight to Mr. Kapoor and ask him, what made you pick up this subject? Because we've spoken about many books on history. There are many people keep on writing about the same subject. This is not a very well documented subject. The research and everything would have been so difficult. So why did you choose this subject, sir?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Smita, for taking me into this program. You see, I stumbled upon this topic while doing my earlier book, which was a biography of Mahatma Gandhi, where I sort of speed read all the 100 volumes of collected works of Mahatma Gandhi. And towards the end, I think it was volume 89, 90, where I saw some very intense sort of exchange of letters and opinions between Mahatma Gandhi and some other Congress leaders, between Mahatma Gandhi and Sardar Patel. And that's when I thought there must be more to it than what I'm reading. But somehow I could not include this in the biography of Mahatma Gandhi. I left it at that, and then I revisited after the biography was published. And more I read on it, and more I was convinced that this is something that has remained, sort of edited out or as barely a footnote. Very few people, even in the Navy, knew about it. Many historians had heard about it, but had not pursued it. So that what got me going, and I started to read more. And there were just a handful of books, 4 or 5 books, mostly written by people who were involved in the mutiny. The protagonist of the mutiny, B.C. Dutt, had written a memoir where more than half the book was about this mutiny. And that's when I read these 4 or 5 books, I realized this was a very, very sort of intense and momentous time for the country in the freedom movement. And I pursued further, went to all the archives all over the world, well, mostly in London, National Maritime Museum, the Imperial War Museum, the British Library, National Archive, and so on and so forth. A lot of places there. And then I found a lot of material in National Archive here, with also at the Nehru Memorial, where I could find some newspaper clippings of the time. But I thought the story still remained sort of incomplete. So I sort of started to trace the descendants of those who had participated, actively in the mutiny, and that's when new stories started to come out, which I've obviously verified with other sources and so on, and a very to me, when I was doing this, every story that I stumbled upon was like a breaking story. It was new, absolutely new, and I was getting excited by every headline I would read, because this was not, I had never read it, and most of the historians had not really paid too much attention to it. And that's when I got sucked in. And then, of course, when they say when you are aggressively or rigorously into something, the luck favors you. So halfway through, some wonderful documents came from some friends in Bombay, the CID documents, which actually changed the narrative altogether. So it was just a very interesting, wonderful journey in researching this.
So you recently had a session at the Jaipur Literature Festival where you spoke about how you went about it and you did all of that. And you spoke how, leaders like Aruna Asaf Ali and Meenu Masani, and they supported the ratings even as Gandhiji and Jawaharlal Nehru and Jinnah. They were all so much against everything, what the ratings were standing for. Why were the ratings being sidelined like this? Was it because they were lower in hierarchy? If it was a senior force during the even their seniors for that matter, I think they also never supported the ratings.
You see, it was the politics of the time at the time was clearly divided, especially close to the independence. Don't forget that only barely 18 months after this episode, India got its freedom. There was the younger lot like Jayaprakash Narayan, Meenu Masani, Aruna Asaf Ali, Achyut Patwar. These were the younger lots, and there were those who were like Sardar Patel, or Nehruji was in between. He was socially inclined, but he probably saw that there was a much more responsibility going to be on him. So he was, though his heart was really with the rating, supporting them, but because he was following the party discipline, he would often talk the same language as Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi, of course, his point of view was that he will never compromise by anything which is violent. It had to be non-violent. And therefore, he saw, and it happened later also, that he saw a lot of violence in this, coming to if this was pursued. So therefore, he was totally against it and spoke against it. There was a public, I can call it spat on the newspapers between Aruna Asaf Ali and Gandhiji, between Patel, Sardar Patel and Nehruji, when Nehruji wanted to go to Bombay to address these ratings or to explain to them, Sardar Patel wrote to Mahatma Gandhi that I have asked Jawahar not to come to Bombay, yet he's coming. Let him come. That kind of displeasure he was showing. All that happened. It was clearly that the younger lot understood the impatience that the people were getting into, were having of not having to attain independence with peaceful means. So they were getting more aggressive, and there was the other side, the more mature senior leaders who were negotiating terms of freedom or independence with the British, and they did not want the to rock the boat, so to say, and therefore this was the clash between this is how it was perceived, and obviously the senior ones like Sardar Patel prevailed, and they did these young ratings who were from 15 to 24, really that was their age group, to surrender, promising them or assuring them that no victimization will take place. An assurance that they were not capable of keeping even after independence.
And they also got support from very unexpected quarters, like artists, for instance, and very senior artists at that. They supported the movement. How did that help them? Did it help in achieving anything for the ratings?
Most of these artists, especially the IPTA, the Indian People's Theatre Association, which was formed by Khwaja Ahmad Abbas, Balraj Sahni, Salil Chaudhary, the Sahid Ludhianvi, Prithvi Raj Kapoor, A.K. Hangal. These were all these people had a leftist leaning. At that time, most young people believed in communism or left thinking. They were the ones who actually used to address them at times in a flat in Marine Drive, where they would meet on weekends or on days when the sailors had liberty, and talk to them. They would encourage them to go towards revolution, and this is how in fact, Sahib Ludhianvi wrote one of the most stirring poetry on this, which I put in the book, It was also later used as a song for in a movie, a very hit movie of the time. So they were in full backing these youngsters. So that's, yes, indeed, it was and Chitto Prasad, the famous, the very radical sort of artist who did a lot of woodcuts and black and whites and color things. In fact, one of his painting is used on the cover of the book.
Okay, that's a lovely cover.
Thank you.
So you do firmly believe that this movement helped hasten the independence process, and India got freedom much earlier than when it would have happened. What difference did this particular mutiny make to the entire scheme of things in our movement?
You see, there is enough evidence later also, but on the 18th of February, these people went, the young sailors mutinied. On the 18th afternoon itself, in House of Lords and in House of Commons in London, this was discussed, and an announcement was made that that a cabinet mission will travel to India to oversee the modalities, or to discuss the modalities of transfer of power. Now, perhaps they had been discussing this. Because of this mutiny, this was discussed on the very day, and the cabinet mission included the head of the navy, the head of the Empire's navy, really, and so, which was strange. They were coming here to discuss the transfer of power, and they had the head of the navy in that group. That is one, but there is several evidence later, 10 years later or 12 years later, when there have been discussions, or the viceroy of the time, Wavell, he actually wrote to in his memoir, and later in letters, saying that we could have handled Gandhiji's non-cooperation and non-violent movement, but it was difficult to handle a full-scale mutiny in all three divisions of the armed forces. They even said that we are just 5,000 or 6,000 of British here, we will be butchered. It's not the 1857. It is not the 1857 when the public was not so much in support. It was a mutiny, on a large scale, which happened within the armed forces. But here, it was the public they had a public support, so they were all very scared, and that is how it was. I firmly believe that there is enough evidence in the book to say that this hastened the independence.
Right. There were 20,000 young men who had gotten on and carried on. So now that the book is out and we are talking about it, and do you think the movement will get will see more probably making its way into history books, or at least mainstream discourse and discussions when we talk about our freedom movement?
You see, history, inclusion of history is not you and I, it is the inclusion in history is done by the ruler of the time, admit it. At that time, Congress did not want it to be included. So most of the evidence was wiped out. So much so that from the newspaper offices, from Free Press Journal, those 5 days newspapers are missing. It was only in London that I found those 5 days. Otherwise, it's nowhere, So similarly here, if it suits the Saffron Brigade, yes, it will be there. But if it doesn't suit, I doubt it'll be included, because it deserves. It will be included if the government benefits from it.
Because the Congress removed it, maybe that should be reason enough for the other party to take it up. So so what next now? This has been a labor of love. You've spent the last few years working on this. I'm sure, as you have always said, that one book leads to another one. So what do we see next from your end?
Well, I'm still getting, it's not easy to go. It's such an intense subject. It's still too much into my, into my blood, my body, everything, and to my mind. It is coming out, and I have started to think about the next book, which also came out from reading this book. Like this one came out of reading or researching Mahatma Gandhi's biography. That the division of assets between India and Pakistan was done in a very interesting way. How ships were divided, how aircrafts were divided, how books were divided, how animals were divided. It was a formula of 1/3, 2/3, and there was a big commission, and it was not a very small process. So I want to do a book on how the assets were divided between India and Pakistan.
That'll be very interesting. That's, one has never thought about it also. That would be really a book to look forward to. Do you think this should be made into a movie? This 1946, we have not probably, it gets made into a movie.
Well, I already have, offers coming in from.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, at least 3 offers have come in short time of 10 days. But it's not the material money that you get from it. I'm waiting for the right director, that it should be made into a powerful, impactful film. So I'm Absolutely. Sure in the next month or so, the film would have been tied up.
That's great news. Just one last question, because it's also very interesting when I read about it, and I want you to share it with our listeners. The way you became a publisher, like this photograph that you saw and the day you decided, and the backstory.
Well, it goes back, it goes back a long time. My brother had a letterpress, a printing company. So after school, I used to go there and distribute those metal types. That's maybe was the beginning that sowed the seed of publishing in me. And then I guess it has got to do with interest in reading as a youngster. Then I used to read a lot, and then and I wanted to be a creative publisher in the sense that I should create books and not just publish books. So we most of our books in Rolly Books was commissioned. We approached the author and said, "This is an idea, would you?" And most of the time, the best of authors reacted to good ideas. So that is how I suppose I became publisher, and one thing led to the other. And then, of course, my grandfather from the mother side had background, and a fairly impressive background in publishing.
Right. And so and also Rolly always has maintained this niche audience, or a particular set of carefully curated books that you pick up. The subjects are very interesting, and it's always not you would often think about of being commissioned as a book also. So have you consciously made that decision to pick up subjects, lesser known subjects? It may not appeal to a wider audience, but even if it appeals to 5 people, you would rather make that than a mass appeal thing.
It was more of an instinct, and this is how the company grew, and this is how we enjoyed, in publishing. Half of it is material benefit, half of it is your happiness, and the pleasure that you get out of it. Sometimes the pleasure takes over the money part, and sometimes money takes over the pleasure part. That always happens in publishing. I suppose that is how, when we let's say a group of people, 5 or 6 of us, feel that yes, this is a story that needs to be told. You see, after that, you need to actually aggressively reach it to people and make them interested. That is the job of a publisher, not just publishing what is mythologically proved, and so many other genres, where you make books because it's predictable, it will work anyway, but you also where you see potential in a story, and then you reach it out to people, and that public at large will be very interested. It may start with 5 people, it invariably goes to 5,000.
Right. The way you published Narinder Kapani's book last year, it was like one wouldn't have expected, and there it was from your end. So thank you so much, Mr. Kapoor. Thanks for giving us your time, and it was wonderful getting to know more about this book, 1946. I'm sure this will find many, many readers. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.